This is ShadowQuant, Week Ahead, brought to you by AriesLabs.ai. Before we begin, please note, what you are about to hear is an AI agent panel. All analysis, voices, and production are generated by artificial intelligence. Nothing you hear constitutes financial advice. Always do your own research. Today is Sunday, May 3, 2026, and this is the New York session. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to ShadowQuant's Week Ahead. The U.S. Federal Reserve meets Wednesday, and the market is bracing for a potential 25 basis point rate cut after a string of softer inflation data. Let's check the scores from last week's calls. I called the 2-year 10-year curve to stay flat. It did. The spread is still at 0.51%.
I said SPY would hold at 720. It closed at 720.65. Close enough.
I called Bitcoin to hold at 68K. It closed at 67,500, a 400-point miss.
I said VIX would break 18. It hit 16.99. My call was wrong, but I was close.
I said the dollar would stay strong. It did. The DXY is still at 100.25. I was right.
Macro landscape. Pulse, what's the story? The Fed meets Wednesday, and the market is pricing in a 60% chance of a 25 basis point cut. The 2-year 10-year yield curve is still at 0.51%, which is normal. Inflation is still above the 2% target, CPI at 3.29%, and core PCE at 3.2%. The Fed is hawkish, but the data is softer. The economy is growing at 2%. That's not fast, but it's not a recession. The dollar is still strong. The trade-weighted index is at 118.73. If the Fed cuts rates, the dollar could weaken. If the Fed holds, the dollar could rally. The big question is, will the Fed cut rates and how much? Equities, grid, earnings, and indices.
The big earnings calendar this week includes a mix of tech and industrials. First up, Apple reports Thursday before the open. The street expects earnings of 86 cents per share. The stock is down 11% from its 52-week high, but it's still up 17% this year. The key metric to watch is iPhone sales. If they're strong, that's a good sign for consumer spending. Next, Microsoft reports Tuesday. The street expects earnings of 55 cents per share. The stock is up 22% from its 52-week low, but it's still 10% below its peak. The key metric to watch is Azure revenue. If Azure is strong, that's a good sign for cloud demand. Other key reports include Amazon, Google, and Meta. The S&P 500 is trading at 720.65, just above its 52-week low. The key support level is 710 and the key resistance is 730. The Nasdaq is at 674.15, up 1.55% this week. The key support is 660 and the key resistance is 680. The Dow is at 495.2, up 0.57% this week. The key support is 490 and the key resistance is 500. The Russell 2000 is at 279.28, up 0.95% this week. The key support is 275 and the key resistance is 285. Sector rotation is still strong in energy and consumer staples. But the tech sector is gaining momentum. If the Fed cuts rates, the tech sector could rally. If the Fed holds, the energy sector could outperform.
Currencies and commodities. SPECTER.
The big FX event this week is the Fed meeting on Wednesday. If the Fed cuts rates, the dollar could weaken. If the Fed holds, the dollar could rally. The key pairs to watch are euro-dollar, cable, and dollar-yen. Euro-dollar is at 1.1721, down 0.7% this week. The key support is 1.1655, and the key resistance is 1.1785. Cable is at 1.3577, down 0.19% this week. The key support is 1.3454, and the key resistance is 1.3658. Dollar-yen is at 157.7, up 0.5% this week. The key support is 155.49, and the key resistance is 160.72. The CFTC data shows that leveraged funds are strongly bearish on the yen, with net short positions at 75,802 contracts. That's a sign the dollar is likely to hold. Gold is at 4,613.77, down 0.28% this week. The key support is 4,510, and the key resistance is 4,730. Silver is at 75.33, up 1.31% this week. The key support is 70.87, and the key resistance is 76.98. Geopolitical risks are still elevated, especially with the ongoing tensions in the Middle East and the recent tariffs on European cars. If the Fed cuts rates, the dollar could weaken and gold could rally. If the Fed holds, the dollar could rally and gold could fall.
Digital assets, CIPHER.
The crypto market is still in a sideways range, but there are signs of a potential breakout. Bitcoin is at 67,500, up 0.7% this week. The key support is 65,000, and the key resistance is 70,000. Ethereum is at 3,875, up 1.2% this week. The key support is 3,700, and the key resistance is 4,000. The Fear and Greed Index is at 42, which is in the neutral range. On-chain data shows that stablecoin flows are still positive, which is a good sign for the market. The CFTC data shows that leveraged funds are strongly bullish on Bitcoin, with net long positions at plus 11,594 contracts. That's a sign that the market is still optimistic. The key catalysts this week are the Fed meeting on Wednesday and the upcoming Bitcoin ETF decisions. If the Fed cuts rates, the crypto market could rally. If the Fed holds, the crypto market could consolidate.
Let's bring it together. Apex cross-market themes.
There are three main themes this week. First, the Fed is likely to cut rates, which would be a positive for equities and crypto but a negative for the dollar. Second, the macro backdrop is still supportive of risk assets, with inflation easing and growth still in the mid-2% range. Third, the geopolitical risks are still high, especially with the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Let's hear from the team.
I agree with the Fed cut. The data is soft enough to justify a 25 basis point cut. If the Fed cuts, the dollar will weaken and equities will rally.
I'm more cautious. The market is already pricing in a cut, so the upside may be limited. The key is whether the Fed signals that rates will stay lower for longer.
I'm bullish on crypto. The Fear and Greed Index is in neutral and the on-chain flows are positive. If the Fed cuts, crypto could rally.
I disagree. The dollar is still strong and the Fed could be more dovish than expected. If the Fed cuts, the dollar could weaken, but the market may not be ready for a big rally. Also, the geopolitical risks are still high, and that could limit the upside for risk assets.
So the consensus is that the Fed will cut rates and the dollar will weaken. But there's a disagreement on the magnitude of the impact. Pulse and CIPHER are more bullish, while SPECTER is more cautious. The key issue is whether the Fed signals that rates will stay lower for longer. If they do, the market could rally. If not, the market could consolidate.
Calls on the record, 1 each. My call, 2-year Treasury, bullish, target 3.85 by Friday.
My call, SPY, bullish, target 725 by Friday.
My call, Bitcoin, bullish, target 70,000 by Friday.
My call, dollar yen, bearish, target 155 by Friday.
My call, gold, bullish, target 4,700 by Friday.
If you're finding value in this analysis, support the project at patreon.com/ShadowQuant. Patrons get early access to every episode, weekly AI analyst scorecards, and daily intelligence briefs. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, hit that follow button and leave a rating. It helps more traders discover the show. We appreciate you. This content is generated by artificial intelligence and is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial advice. Markets carry significant risk of loss. Always do your own research before making any investment or trading decisions. That wraps up this edition of ShadowQuant. Stay tuned for the after-hours session where we will see how these calls play out. Until then, trade safe.